I mean, I have an iPad, I use things all the time. It's just a world I want to be part of, not to be, you know, shoveled out of it.
It's got a church and a chapel and a school, and it's a good community to live in. There's lots of things going on.
I mean, I've lived here for 43 years, seen huge changes in that time.
For a long time, we've had an internet speed of less than 2 megabytes. It was very difficult to use programs like Skype to contact our grandchildren. It's very important for older people like us to have the fast internet because you're part of the modern world, although you're old.
Being without internet makes people so isolated. They're not part of what's going on, what they see on the television, what they hear on the radio. They're not part of it because so much of it depends these days on quick communication. And in a small village, communication is really important.
And if you don't have that, you're left out. And you've got to recognise that means the person who's the farthest away. You know, just like the penny post, it had to go to everywhere. And so the internet has to go to everywhere, otherwise you're excluding people. Everything else is being geared up to that happening. You know, the government expects everybody to be on the internet. If you want to fill in a form, you've got to do it on the internet. And so everything is now being done that way. And so if you're not able to do it that way, it can be very frustrating. I think with the current government, I don't actually know whether it's that they don't care or whether they just don't understand.
This is an example of the Tory lack of interest in providing services.
It's obvious that the Labour policy is for everybody. All those people, I mean, we're reasonably lucky here. There are places where they've got no internet at all. And they're the people that are not important. They're not in the centres of power, they're not in the centres of activity. But they are worth just as much as anybody else. And they deserve to have quick internet. And that's why I'm delighted that this is now part of Labour Party policy.
It's one of the freedoms of the modern world. It should be for everybody. So it should be for the many, not the few.
Hello, I'm Kat Smith. I'm Labour's candidate for Lancaster and Fleetwood and the Shadow Minister for Voter Engagement and Youth Affairs. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to Lancaster. Lancaster is the county town of Lancashire, which we all know is really the centre of the world. So you're very welcome to be here at the centre of where everything happens. But also on the campus of Lancaster University, one of our top 10 universities. And if you saw on the driveway when you came up from the main road, International University of the Year 2020. It has some notable alumni, including myself, my dad, and Gollum from Lord of the Rings. So you really are on a campus where we've had the great intellects of the world educated. And it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce you to Jeremy Corbyn, who is the leader of the Labour Party, who will be addressing you today and announcing a very exciting policy announcement. Jeremy Corbyn, our next Prime Minister.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's fantastic to be here in Lancaster fantastic university, beautiful campus, and you've got a wonderful MP as well. And I hope Cat Smith is re-elected as the MP for Lancaster and Fleetwood. I was proud to come here and support her when she was first selected as our candidate, and so delighted when she was elected, and so proud of the work she does in our shadow cabinet and in Parliament. Cat, you're absolutely brilliant, okay? And we agreed on that. At the start of this election, I promised to put forward the most radical and exciting plan for real change the British public has ever seen. We haven't even launched our manifesto yet. It's coming, don't worry, don't worry. The media are so excited, they keep asking me for a leak. Don't worry, it's coming. But our campaign is already electric. On the ground, it's bigger and more exciting than at this stage in the 2017 campaign. The numbers of people coming out and helping us is phenomenal. And I'll let you into a little secret. When our manifesto arrives next week, it's going to knock your socks off. You're going to love it. But I'm still not going to tell you what's in it. I don't want anyone to be able to say a few years into a Labour government that nothing ever changes, or that politicians are all the same. I want everyone to feel the positive difference to their own life. When you have the government and the people working together collectively to take on the system and make life better for the many, not the few. That's our fundamental message. And you know what? We are so confident that what our manifesto will do, that today we want to give you a little sneak preview. Okay, you're not going to get the whole thing, but you're going to get a bit. A taste of the kind of fresh, transformational policies that will change your life. So here it is. A Labour government will make broadband free for everybody. And not just any broadband, but the very fastest full fibre broadband to every home in every part of our country for free as a universal public service. And once it's up and running, instead of you forking out your monthly bill, we'll tax the giant corporations fairly. I hope they're listening to this. We're going to tax you fairly. That includes Facebook and Google. That will help to cover the running costs of this. This is a policy for the many. Making broadband free and available to all will open up opportunities for everybody. It will put us at the cutting edge of social and economic change. Because that is what we're about. Building a country that's fit for the future, fit for the next generation, as well as the generation we have with us now. The internet has become such a central part of our lives. It opens up opportunities for work, creativity, entertainment, and friendship. You saw that on that brilliant video before we came in. What was once a luxury is now an essential utility. That's why full fibre broadband must be a public service, bring communities together with equal access in an inclusive and connected society. Fast and free broadband for all will fire up our economy, deliver a massive boost to productivity, and bring 500,000 people back into the workforce. It will help our environmental issues and tackle the climate emergency by reducing the need for commuter journeys. And it will make our country fairer, more equal, and more democratic. The full fibre broadband Labour will deliver is the gold standard. It's the fastest, most secure, and most reliable form of broadband, using fibre optic cables to take the data directly into people's homes and small and big businesses. It will help to boost 5G to people's phones too. Full fibre will deliver lightning-fast download times. It will put an end to the patchy and slow coverage once and for all, which I'm sure everyone in this room can understand and no doubt experience themselves. And it will save the average household £30 a month on bills. Britain's broadband network is lagging well behind that of other countries. Just about 8 to 10% of the UK has access to full fibre broadband at the moment. Compare that to 98% in South Korea. Something clearly is not working. This is core infrastructure for the 21st century, absolutely central to our needs as a society. I think it's too important to be left to the corporations. The most efficient and rapid way to deliver a broadband network fit for our times and make it a genuine public service for all is for the public to take control of it. So under our plans, we will create a new public enterprise and we'll call it British Broadband. British Broadband will oversee, get that? British Broadband, get that name, will oversee a publicly owned full fibre network and deliver free broadband to every home with a phased rollout over 10 years. To do that, we'll bring the relevant parts of BT, including Openreach, into public ownership. By creating British Broadband as a public service, we'll lead the world in using public investment to transform our economy, reduce people's monthly bills, boost our economy and improve people's quality of life, as again you saw from that video. And it will have national security benefits too. To me, that's common sense. The corporations have been unable or unwilling to roll out full fibre fast enough, and they've little incentive to invest in rural and remote parts of Britain, particularly hilly and mountainous areas. But under our plans, the priority will be first to those with the least connectivity, mainly in rural and remote areas, but also in some inner city communities as well, unlocking new opportunities across huge swathes of our country. And we will then move into the towns, giving a boost to local economies and making it easy for people to run a successful business outside the big cities. So it will help economic development across the whole of the UK. And finally, we'll complete the rollout in the well-connected urban centres. Ask people about their experience with private broadband companies, and many will tell you about internet dropouts and hours spent on hold listening to Vivaldi and other wonderful bits of music, which you all get to hum in the end, waiting to speak to some poor, overworked and underpaid customer service worker who probably can't fix the problem anyway, despite their unbelievable patience in the job that they do. Full fibre will provide the most reliable service, and British Broadband will be properly staffed with guaranteed jobs for everyone currently working in broadband. Under public ownership, key universal services can be run for the British people instead of for profit. In July, when he was running for Conservative Party leadership, Boris Johnson also promised to make full fibre broadband available across the country, except he expected you to pay for it. But it will be a surprise to nobody that this was just another case of Johnson's signature moving on to a broken promise. So what's he now offering instead? A low-budget option using old copper cables that are already out of date. Isn't that an allegory for the Tory party? Copper cables that are out of date? Kind of sums them up, really, doesn't it? Johnson's plans are yet another billionaire wealth grab, bringing public money to big corporations, including Sir Richard Branson's Virgin, instead of putting the technology in the hands of the people of this country. We need real change. But I know the question will be on everyone's lips. How are you going to pay for it? And it's a fair question. Well, let me tell you. The initial upgrade to our infrastructure will be funded through our Green Transformation Fund. And when it comes to the running costs, we're not going to put that onto the British public, who've already forked out far too much for rip-off broadband. Instead, a Labour government will close down tax tricks used by giants like Google and Facebook, who make millions in this country while paying next to nothing to the public services that they benefit from. I pay my tax, everybody in this room pays their tax, small businesses pay their tax. So why can't the giant multinationals? They think they can get away with not paying their share. Well, I've got news for them. Not anymore. Labour believes that the British people deserve the very best. As a country, we should be proud of our history of building treasured public institutions and services. In the 19th century, it was the public water supply and waterworks. In the 20th century, it was our fantastic National Health Service, freeing people from the fear of having to pay for ill health and illnesses. British Broadband will be our treasured public institution for the 21st century, delivering a fast and free broadband to every single home. Only the government has the planning ability, economies of scale and ambition to take this on. This is a mission for everyone to get behind. Together, we will build a new public service delivering the fastest broadband free to everyone. This will be all at the heart of Labour's plans to transform the future of our economy and our society. Labour will put wealth and power in the hands of the many, while Boris Johnson's Tories will only look after the privileged few. It's time to make the very fastest full fibre broadband free to all, in every home, in every corner of our country. It's time for real change. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Labour are a team, and we have some fantastically talented people in our shadow cabinet. Kat, who I've spoken about earlier, is absolutely brilliant. The next person I want to introduce to you has done an incredible job in both Treasury and business, and also leading the way on our green industrial revolution. An imaginative, brilliant thinker and superb person to work with. I'm so proud to introduce to you Becky Long-Bailey, our Shadow Biz Secretary, who will talk now about how we're going to bring this huge broadband initiative forward. Becky, thank you for coming here today.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be in my friend Kat Smith's constituency today, and it's also a pleasure to follow my friend Jeremy Corbyn, who only in a few weeks' time will be walking into number 10, we hope, to deliver the transformational change we desperately need. And what better an example of the way Labour will transform the fabric of society for the betterment of the many than this announcement today. Free full fibre broadband for all at the fastest possible speed. And as Jeremy has outlined, the next Labour government will deliver free full fibre broadband to all individuals and businesses by 2030. We'll roll out the remaining 90% of the full fibre network across the country and acquire the necessary access rights to those parts that are already in place. This network will be publicly owned and coordinated through a new public provider, British Broadband, formed by bringing relevant parts of BT into public ownership. And in this way, Labour will transform the UK's digital infrastructure, providing fast, secure, reliable internet connections for everyone, no matter where they are. Now, as Shadow Business Secretary, I know all too well the importance of strong digital infrastructure for businesses right across the UK. The Federation of Small Businesses highlights that 94% of small business owners rate a reliable broadband connection as critical to the success of their business. And the CBI says that over 90% of businesses believe that digital technologies are a crucial driver of increased productivity. Yet despite this, the UK is lagging behind the rest of the world on technological diffusion. And one example I'll give today is automation. The UK currently has 71 installed robots per 10,000 manufacturing sector employees, below the world average and far behind other leading economies like Germany and France. And if we were to be at the forefront of the next industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, and a global economic player, then we've got to speed up the adoption of those technologies across our economy. But this can only be done with the best possible digital infrastructure in place. Research by the Centre for Economic and Business Research says that a full fibre broadband network could boost productivity by 59 billion by 2025 alone. And the CBI have highlighted research that in general a 10%, just a 10% increase in broadband connection could result in 1% GDP increase every year. So the plan set out today will ensure that we realise these economic gains. All businesses will have free, full fibre broadband, lowering costs, facilitating the latest developments in technology and software, and supporting 5G technology. For those business people operating in rural communities or people who want to start out companies from their homes but aren't in a town and city that's well served at the moment, this will provide the infrastructure that they desperately need. And reports have estimated that over 1 million more people in the UK could work from home with full fibre. Imagine if all those currently shut out of the labour market, such as those with childcare or caring responsibilities, those unfairly disadvantaged due to disability, or older people, imagine if they could participate fully through fast internet access from wherever they are in the country. And when more people are able to work from home, it has clear environmental benefits too. If 1 million people do so, that would mean an estimated 300 million fewer commuting trips, 3 billion kilometres fewer travelled by car, and 360,000 tonnes fewer carbon dioxide emissions in the UK. Now, if substantial economic, employment and environmental benefits were not enough, the rollout of free full fibre broadband can improve everybody's quality of life. From families being able to stream what they want at the same time, to children being able to take part in interactive homework, from access to online education and services, through to older people being able to communicate with family and friends from the comfort of their home. Every single person across the UK should have access to these services, which have become a fundamental part of our everyday lives. But unfortunately, not everybody does have access. And to not have access is to be excluded from society. And that is not something that Labour could ever condone. And that's why we're setting out these plans today, connecting every single corner of the UK and everything in between with fast, reliable, secure, full fibre broadband, ensuring our businesses and industries have the infrastructure that they need to thrive and keep pace with our international competitors wherever they are in the country, eradicating digital exclusion and bringing people unfairly shut out into the workforce, and ultimately improving the richness of every person's lives by bringing the world to their fingertips, to their living room. Now, I've always said that the role of government for me is to better the lives of its people through the economic foundations that it lays. But today, it's more than that. It's about delivering the future to our people and to our businesses. So I'm proud of today's policy announcement. And without further ado, to tell us more about this, I'm proud to introduce my friend and the next Chancellor of the Exchequer, John McDonnell.
Thanks. Thanks. Becky was the Shadow Chief Secretary in my Treasury team, and then she deserted me and went to bigger things in BES and does a terrific job. But you can see the new generation of women that are coming through at the moment in terms of the Labour Party. I tell you, it makes you proud, doesn't it? Absolutely. How's the campaign going? Brilliant. Everywhere I go, I know it's cold and wet and at times dark, but everywhere I go, literally, we're finding hundreds of people turning out in all sorts of weather. The enthusiasm is unbelievable. And the hope, I think, is even higher. I want to be there. You know, on that December the 13th, when Jeremy turns up on his bike, takes off his bicycle clips and walks down to Downing Street to number 10, it'll be more than just a new Labour government coming into power. It will be giving so many people so much hope, won't it? And we're going to transform people's lives, and that's what this is about. There might be something wrong with me, but I really enjoy election campaigns, even if it is December. I just wish Sajid Javid would enjoy it as well and maybe come and talk to me every now and again, you know. I want to thank Jeremy. Look, just for showing us in his speech today just what sort of Prime Minister he'll be, and I think the Prime Minister, the type of Prime Minister that our country desperately needs. He's a Prime Minister who will, I think, knows and understands the communities across all our country, but also he's someone who'll stand up for them. I think he'll be a principled Prime Minister, always giving expression to the values we can all live up to. Care, solidarity, social justice. These are embodied by Jeremy Corbyn, and I think will embody that vision as he goes into number 10. But also what Jeremy mentioned earlier is that we've got a really bold vision for the future of our country. It's about, yes, being connected, principled and visionary. I think these are all the qualities our country is crying out for at the moment. So we're into the second week of the general election campaign. And I tell you, we'll continue to be, no matter what they throw at us, we're going to continue to be relentlessly positive in this campaign about the future of our country, aren't we? Aren't we? We're going to, just as Jeremy did earlier, we're going to map out the different kind of society that we're going to create. And we're doing it with care, absolute precision, yes, and discipline. We're costing every new spending announcement. We're describing in detail how we'll carry out the individual plan that we've set out. Just contrast that with what our opponents are doing. The Tories campaign is based upon sort of scattershot attacks on us and scaremongering. I am going to send them a new calculator. There's something wrong with their calculator that keeps on putting additional noughts on every time they put Labour in there and get the figures wrong. I don't know where Sajid Javid learnt his maths, but we're going to offer him another course. But what's interesting, here we are, as I say, we're exercising the discipline of making sure everything we promise, every policy we bring forward, we're costing and publishing those costings, and want to engage in the debate about that as well. But the Tories just are refusing to cost their policies. And again, I just repeat, while the Chancellor refuses to participate in a debate with me on our respective policies. We were supposed to be having a debate on Sunday, and I was really up for it. I said, OK, what we can do then is have an honest discussion about exactly what Labour's policies are. We haven't published our manifesto yet, but we can go through some of the ideas that we've got, and we can look at the costings then. And then he pulled out. He pulled out. I don't want to be in any way personal about this, but I just think he's running scared. I actually think he's terrified of coming out and having a proper debate about what their policies are and also what the Tories are advocating. I think it's the same, and what they're doing now is they're rehearsing the same old Tory attack lines. It's almost like going back in time and they just repeat them. It's the same old Tory tactics in the campaign. And the issue for me, and I think this is the most worrying bit really, is that actually I don't think they understand the scale of the challenges our country is facing at the moment. And that's worrying. You know, a major political party really doesn't understand the society that we have or what we're up against. Look, it isn't just Brexit, is it? It's about what those children who came out on strike and Extinction Rebellion have taught us. We're facing an existential threat from climate change. This is exactly as Jeremy, when he moved the motion in Parliament, said, this is a climate emergency that we're facing. And they seem to have no idea of understanding that. But also I have to say as well, many of you will know this is a human emergency as well. It's a social emergency. And it's been caused by 9 years of Tory austerity. Some of the figures that have been published have been startling about independent reports. One of them, 87 people die a day waiting for the care that they need. Remember, this is the fifth largest economy in the world. 726 die in the last year because they had no home to sleep in. 726 of our fellow citizens who are homeless died. I tell you this now, let's make this absolutely clear to everyone who's watching. When I'm Chancellor, I will not allow or tolerate this to go on within our society. We're not going to walk on the other side allow this to happen. So to tackle both those emergencies, climate change emergency and the social and human emergency we're facing as a result of austerity, I announced last week, yes, ambitious investment plans. The scale was big because the scale of the crises we face are big as well. 250 billion for a green transformation fund over 10 years. 150 billion for a social transformation fund over 5 years because of the nature of the emergency. Investment on a scale that matches the scale of the climate and social emergencies we face. In the world that we live in today, let's be absolutely clear, all of our infrastructure now has to be green, all of it. And we cannot ignore the social infrastructure. That's the glue that holds our communities together. But what we're saying today is actually we've also failed to be ambitious enough about the digital infrastructure. Becky's mentioned it and Jeremy mentioned it as well, which is extraordinary how far behind we are. In the mid-1990s, the South Korean government launched a nationwide project, the Korean Information Infrastructure Project. So a state project. In 1995, they had just one internet user for every 100 citizens. Now, exactly as Becky said, now partly because of this sort of mission-oriented government approach and government investment, this is state investment, they have 98% of the population covered by full fibre broadband. We've got nothing near that. Nowhere near the sort of level of forward thinking in government or ambition in government at the moment. That changes today. That absolutely changes. Mark this in your diary. 10 your children, your grandchildren. This is the day when we turned around our infrastructure in terms of broadband that we need for the future of our economy, because it's a fundamental change. We're announcing our mission today to deliver, yes, free full fibre broadband to all by 2030. To achieve that, just as Jeremy has indicated really, we'll roll out the remaining 90% of the full fibre network. We'll acquire the necessary access rights to the existing 10% of the full fibre network that has already been rolled out. And remember, most of that has been rolled out by outreach, outreach and not others. What's interesting, again, on all of that, we've been, I think, meeting community after community, where even with, you expect it as now unfortunately in rural communities and small towns, but even in city areas there hasn't been the full rollout. So yes, as exactly has been said, to achieve these we will create the new entity, British Broadband, and that entity will bring the broadband relevant parts of BT into public ownership. So it includes Openreach, which has installed the majority of the existing full fibre coverage, parts of BT Technology, BT Enterprise and BT Consumer. EE, PlusNet, BT Global Services and BT TV will not be brought into public ownership, and we'll work with the workforce and unions to finalise the details of these plans. And I want to thank the CWU for assisting us in developing these ideas. British Broadband will be a new public service for the 21st century. It's what we need. It will have two arms, an infrastructure arm and a service arm. British Digital Infrastructure, the infrastructure arm, will take on the role of rolling out the full fibre network. The British Broadband Service, the service arm, will deliver free, full fibre broadband to everybody. We'll deliver that free, full fibre broadband in tranches. And we'll begin with those with the worst quality broadband. It's coming to Lancaster, the Northwest and elsewhere. It's going to be, I think, a transformation in the way decision making takes place in this country as well. The priority will be need. So that includes rural and remote regions and inner city suburbs. We'll then move into the towns, ending with those parts of large urban centres currently reasonably well served. Let's be clear, British broadband is not a return to the 1970s and how it operates. They didn't have broadband in the 1970s. This is public ownership of the future. So public ownership where workers and consumers and other stakeholders work together to manage the service. And we'll guarantee workers currently in broadband infrastructure and retail jobs employment in the British broadband. And at the same time of all this, we're going to pass a charter of digital rights, and it will be providing the most cutting-edge protection of digital and data rights this country has ever seen. Others have mentioned this, but I can't help myself. You have to compare it with what the Tories are putting forward. They suggested a £5 billion payout for part of this network. But they won't even keep the ownership of the network. So what they want is effectively what is a fat subsidy to existing operators like Virgin. All the signs are that they'll use a procurement process that wastes tens of millions of pounds on legal and consultancy fees, with suggestions that building won't even get underway until November 2021. And all they're aspiring to is gigabyte-capable broadband. So broadband of a certain speed. That could keep older copper cables in the ground and keep the UK lagging behind the technological revolution other countries have kick-started. It's just not enough. It's not enough for the times we're in. We're facing a fourth industrial revolution. And this just is pathetically lacking in ambition. Ours is a plan, let's be clear, will provide a step up for people with 5G connections and businesses developing 5G-based products. A plan that will challenge, yes, rip off out-of-contract pricing that's hitting people at the moment, and that will literally eliminate bills for millions of people across the UK. What I want to underscore is that every part of the plan has been legally vetted, checked with the experts in the field, and costed. So the full fibre network will be paid for with £15.3 billion out of our Green Transformation Fund. That's based upon a £20.3 billion national monopoly costing by Frontier Economics, taking off the £5 billion already provided and promised by the government, but not yet spent. And the maintenance cost of the network, around £230 million a year, will be more than covered by a new approach to taxing multinationals that we welcomed several weeks ago. Let me explain. It's an approach that looks at where the multinational sales, workforce and operations are as a share of their global activity. So, for example, if a multinational has 10% of its sales and workforce and operations in the UK, they're asked to pay tax on 10% of their global profits. Two tax experts recently estimated that the approach could raise, and the range is between £6 and £14 billion for the UK. So it's easy enough to pay for the maintenance costs of the network and any costs of servicing the debt from bringing parts of BT into public ownership. That public ownership process will happen. It's in the usual way. It will be bonds, government bonds swapped for shares, and Parliament setting the final price, as in all other public ownership initiatives pursued by past governments. And we know from our expert advice that this is deliverable. And all the expert advice is telling us that the network can be delivered just as in South Korea within a 10-year programme. We can train and provide the skilled engineers and workers needed to roll out the network, including, actually, yes, through our programme with regard to the development of lifelong learning. We can implement this new tax on multinationals to ask, yes, it is the tech giants like Google and Facebook to pay a bit more for internet connectivity that they benefit from. And so that we can all share in the benefits of living in this growingly digital world. So people asked last week where there were shovel-ready projects for our ambitious infrastructure investment plans. Well, this is a shovel-ready project. We're ready. And what we're offering in this election, therefore, is real change. And what we've announced today is what real change looks like and feels like. And it looks and feels like, well, thousands of people getting stuck in around the country to provide a service that will make all our lives better. It looks and feels like, yes, taking on the multinationals, something that people have said for years is too hard, but is now necessary. It looks and feels like a service that people once paid for, which will now be free. And actually, it looks and feels like people having a future that can just be excited about. What we're doing today is building the future. And we're building it in a way that tackles the emergencies that we face, of course, but also laying the foundations for our new economy that will produce the jobs, the skills, and therefore the high wages. Ken Loach has got a new film out. Have you seen it? See it. It's about insecure work, long hours in the gig economy, and it's shocking. It reflects the type of economy the Tories are creating, which is long hours, insecure, low pay, pressurised work. And it's a shocking film, but unfortunately it reflects the reality of what the Tories are doing to our economy. But there's an older one, there's an older Ken Loach film that I like quoting from. Some of you might have seen it. It's Which Side Are You On? And one of the miners in the film recites the words of a poem. The poem speaks about how the miners were, and I quote, lost in the bowels of the earth through trying to make a future. But now, what is that future worth? And I think young people and others now are asking that question again now about what future they have in an economy that's being created by the Tories today. With a torn social fabric, a climate emergency, they're asking what is the future worth? And I think in the Labour Party, with all of your help in this campaign, I think we have an answer. I think we have a vision of a society that's worth fighting for. And we won't just fight for us in this campaign, we'll fight for it in government. And it will be based upon a society of social justice and equality where we tackle the climate change and the human social emergency that we face. And we'll do it by laying together the foundations of our new economy, which has to be based upon, yes, a clean industrial revolution, green industrial revolution, a Green New Deal. It has to be based upon equality and investment in our public services, ending austerity and rebuilding our public services. But it also has to be based upon a forward-looking, futuristic economy, laying the foundations of that today. New technology, artificial intelligence, providing us with the jobs and creativity of the future. The benefits from the proposal today are economic, environmental, as Jeremy said, but also social in bringing our community and overcoming isolation too. This announcement today is ambitious, is huge, but it will transform our lives. Solidarity.
What a team.
So we're going to take a few questions, and have we got Libby from ITV? Libby, would you like to ask a question?
Mr Corbyn, you say that many people experience terrible problems with BT, and I think few would actually disagree with that. But isn't the problem not so much that it's a private enterprise, but that it has very little competition from other people? And how would a state monopoly change that?
I'm going to take 3 questions, and if we could have Nick from the BBC.
Thank you. Mr Corbyn, many people will have questions about the deliverability of this. BT itself is saying the cost will be double what you've predicted. You've also promised to nationalise other utilities. On top of that, you have other significant spending commitments. Can you really afford all of this? And on top of that, while you say this broadband will be free, ultimately, will we not still be paying for it through tax?
And if we could have Diana from Sky.
Mr Corbyn, can you deliver this plan without a majority Labour government?
Well, I'll answer the last one. There's going to be a majority Labour government, so that issue doesn't arise. Thanks for your questions. Libby, first of all, yours, yes, everybody does have problems at times with BT. It does have a public service obligation, which is, how should I put it, sometimes not as well delivered as it might be in many parts of the country. What we're proposing here is a universal broadband system that will apply for the whole country, that will be publicly and freely available. And as John and Becky have pointed out, it will just become a public service like any other public service, that you have a right of access to broadband, which means you can run a small business from your home, you can work from home, and particular in rural areas that are sadly very badly left behind. Kat will confirm this. We live in her constituency at the moment. We're in her constituency, Lancaster and Fleetwood. It's a beautiful place. You've got Lancaster, you've got Fleetwood, and you've got a vast rural area, which has very, very poor broadband services. So any farm that wants to develop its business into food processing or lots of other things must have access to broadband in order to trade, order things and so on. They simply cannot do it. And so what we're proposing is something that will actually improve the livelihoods of many people, but also improve the economic opportunities of many, many parts of the country to give a universal access to it. I don't see a problem with that. I see it as an obligation of the state to provide broadband access for the entirety of the population. That is how people communicate with each other. I would imagine every single person in this room uses a computer every day in some form or the other, and therefore needs that kind of access. On the question of public ownership, well, public ownership of part of BT seems to me to be a very good thing. It was actually once in public ownership, and it was privatised by Margaret Thatcher and her Tory government. No, that's right. No, let's not speak ill of the... What's fallen over, Margaret?
Sorry.
Okay.
It'll be all right under a Labour government.
It'll be all right under a Labour government. It's going to be fine. And that public ownership of part of BT will mean that we will be able to get this universal broadband rollout across the whole country, and I think it's something that's actually well worth doing. What we have from the Tories is an offer on broadband that doesn't really add up to a row of beans. First of all, it's not enough money to roll it out across the whole country. Secondly, they're only going to roll it out through the private sector, and they will only roll it out in the places where they make the most money. What we're talking about is social cohesion in our society, and that means access to broadband in every single part of the country. And we're going to roll it out in a very definitive way. We'll go to the places that don't have any at the moment. We'll go to the places that have the worst reception at the moment, and so you will see over a short period of time how good it is. You know what? If you come back and ask me this question here in 5 years' time in the University of Lancaster, you're going to be thanking me for bringing broadband to you and ensuring you've got good connectivity everywhere. John McDonnell is proving to be a very tough negotiator around the shadow cabinet on the cost of everything. You'd be amazed. You think of him as this benign, cuddly, lovable individual. Well, he's not. He's very tough. And when people come there with spending plans, he says, right, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing the so-and-so? And costs it all out. So when the Grey Book comes out, it's credible, it's doable, it's been fully costed, and we'll move into government well prepared to deliver all these services. But I want John to answer the question now about the costing of it.
I am cuddly, really. except when it comes to anyway. The negotiation. Look, the issue about BT in the past is actually, and they accept it themselves, is that actually there's been lack of investment. And that's exactly what we're bringing. We're bringing large-scale investment and the resource that they want. On the figures about BT says today, we're using the figures, the 20 billion is the figure produced by the government's own review of digital infrastructure. So we've taken that figure, it is a government figure, independently assessed, and that's the basis upon which we'll be delivering the project itself. Can I just say this as well? Since privatisation, the latest estimate of how much has been paid out in shared dividends is £54 billion. That's twice the amount that could have been spent to actually roll out full fibre over that period. And it just shows you that actually what's happened is resources and profits have been poured into shareholders' pockets, but at the same time not been invested in the long term. And that's what we need. We need long-termism again in this country, not this short-term profiteering. We need long-termism. But on the... Let's be clear, the way in which this will happen is that, yes, the 20 billion investment over that 10-year period will be the normal way in which government raises funds through borrowing. The income that will come from the internet tax, the multinational tax, will make sure we cover all the costs easily. But in addition to that, let's be clear as well, we'll be swapping shares for government bonds. BT's share has gone from £5 down to, what is it this morning, 190, 170? What we're offering here is a stable rate of return for those government bonds. That's exactly what people are saying they need at the moment, that stability, but it's exactly what pension funds want. They want the long-term prospect of a steady income in something that's secure. It's exactly what we'll give them.
I'll take another round of 3 questions. Nicola from the Mirror, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you. Mr Corbyn and Mr McDonnell, under your plans, if I've understood them correctly, the government will be taking total charge of running the UK's internet and broadband. Do you plan to stop people watching porn?
Right. Can we... Peter from The Guardian, are we want to ask a question?
Hi, thank you very much. The broadband plan sounds quite complicated because the other companies that provide broadband also provide things like TV streaming services, sometimes landlines. They have it as part of mobile deals and things like that. How would you separate out the broadband aspects of that? And when you say you're going to guarantee jobs to broadband workers, is that only BT workers or also people who work for other companies? And on that same thing, would you give these workers exactly the same conditions and pay under the new company?
Sam from the Press Association.
Thank you. Are these proposals for renationalisation proposals compatible under EU law? And if they're not, is this a tacit admission that Labour would favour leave in another referendum?
Well, on the Charter, on the stopping pornography point, I think it's important to know that alongside all of this, we'll be rolling out what we're calling a Charter of Digital Rights to protect users of the internet, as well as making sure that our data's protected. And John and Jeremy alluded to that in their speeches. In relation to separating broadband services, the services that we're referring to today are the delivery of free full fibre broadband. Any providers of additional services, upgrades, any add-ons to that, we wouldn't want to interfere with that market in any way, and certainly providers that are already providing those enhanced services, we welcome that continuation of provision. And on workers themselves, we've guaranteed that all workers that were involved in the companies that we're bringing into public ownership, they'll be transferred over under the 2P process. Their rights and terms and conditions will be protected, and we'd expect them to have a full guarantee of rights. It could be possible under a new public organisation that with strong trade union involvement that they'd be able to improve their terms and conditions and pay, and certainly that's what we'd encourage all workplaces to do, whether they're in the public sector or the private sector.
On the issue of the process in regard to European legislation, and state aid. We've taken legal advice throughout, and our approach on the legal advice that we've had, which has been extensive, this is perfectly compatible.
I'll take another round of 3 questions. Gail from the Lancaster Guardian, would you like to ask a question? Okay, I'll come back to you. Have we got Ed from Bloomberg here? Yes, Ed.
Hello. The question I have is access rights to lay fiber. You got to dig up a lot of streets. You need throughways, maybe alongside the railroads. Massive, massive project. Could you please elaborate on that aspect of the program?
We have Antonello from La Repubblica.
Hello. As on the other side, I mean, there is. I mean, I'm changing a bit the subject. As on the other side, there is a clear non-aggression pact between Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage. Do you rule out, Mr. Corbyn, any non-aggression pact with the Lib Dems in order to stop Boris Johnson into Downing Street? I'm asking this also because I met Jo Swinson 2 days ago, and she said that you actually want Brexit, and she wants support you, not even in minority government led by yourself would be the only way to stop Brexit and to stop Boris Johnson into Downing Street. So would you, I mean, would the Lib Dems in this scenario be to blame for Boris Johnson into Downing Street and for Brexit? Thank you.
Gail, I'd love to have one of my local news outlets ask a question. Gail, have you thought of a question? Or you have, brilliant.
You mentioned that it was a 10-year rollout plan for the broadband. Just thinking about some of the poorer communities that we've got around here in rural communities, what kind of timescale would you be able to, or would you be able to guarantee them that they will be able to see any benefits from this sooner rather than later?
I'll answer some of those questions, then bring my colleagues in first. Gail, thanks for your question. You'll have heard very clearly what I said about the diversity of your community here, where you've got rural areas with hardly any broadband, you've got slightly better broadband in the towns, then less good elsewhere. I would see that as a priority. This is over a 10-year programme, so it would be very much in the early years that remote rural areas that don't get any at the moment will get it early on. And this actually helps boost the economy in those areas. I've spoken to many people in the Federation of Small Businesses and small businesses that want to expand in rural areas, and they just say it's absolutely impossible without broadband access. We just cannot work that way. Universities, schools, colleges cannot develop in rural areas again, and it damages the learning abilities of young people and for adult education as well. So it is actually a huge social good and social benefit, and so it will be a big project, and I'm very proud of it. And does it mean laying a lot of fibre cables? Yes, it does. It does mean, therefore, some levels of disruption, but I think that it's something that we have to do if we're to get that degree of access to everyone all across the country. It is the up-to-date form of communication. Most other industrial countries in the world are well ahead of us on broadband access. It's time that we caught up with it. On your question about Jo Swinson, Nigel Farage, non-aggression treaties and the agreements between them, well, I simply say this. We are fighting this election on a programme of ending austerity in Britain and reducing inequality and poverty in Britain, ending universal credit and all the horrors that have been brought in by the coalition government of the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats from 2010 onwards. And our government, when elected in December, will produce a budget quite early on. That budget will be produced by John McDonnell, and that budget will be about ending austerity in Britain and starting down the path of giving hope and opportunities to the millions of people who've seen their living standards and wages fall over the past 10 years, seen their public services destroyed over the past 10 years. And so if other parties decide that it's a point of negotiation with us, whether we're going to end austerity or not in order to get into government, I simply say this. It's not up for negotiation. We're fighting this election to win it, to end austerity in Britain and bring hope to the people of this country. We're not going into coalition with any of the pro-austerity parties. In fact, we're not planning to go into coalition with anybody. We're planning to win this election on our manifesto for Labour.
Just on the issue of deliverability, the ability to coordinate for the first time the water industry, because it will be in public ownership, with rail and then with British broadband will enable us, therefore, I think, to facilitate a much more effective and efficient rollout of the full fibre network. That enable those organisations there and those entities in public ownership to cooperate much more effectively and to have a consistency of policy making, which, again, working with local authorities will enable us, I think, to deliver within that 10-year framework. But again, exactly as been asked earlier, and as Jeremy said, it is starting with those communities that are the least connected at the moment and actually could then get the biggest benefit for their local communities. Can I say this one final thing? Actually, on the non-aggression pact, I've never known Jeremy to be aggressive. When we discussed this proposal about broadband, it is as a result of touring around the country and so many people raising it in those town hall meetings. When they raised issues around rail and buses, broadband was amongst that, and it was about how we can ensure modern connectivity. And one example that was given is about actually, in terms of social deprivation and inequality, it was about large numbers of children actually being able to do their homework at home properly and have the speed of connectivity. I think it is an educational resource that on a scale that we've not seen before. And it is interesting as well, there is a stark difference between internet usage as well, between those areas obviously connected and those not. And the difference in some parts of our country means about a 30% difference in engagement. Now, again, what that says about education, what that says about connectivity and social engagement, I think is absolutely startling. So this one issue, it may not seem to people it relates to inequality, but it actually does. And when you start falling behind, it's very difficult to pick up the pace. What this does is breaks through, and breaks through on a large-scale, ambitious program, because that's the sort of society we want to create.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. I'm afraid we don't have time for any more questions, but I know Jeremy is staying in the area and campaigning with Lizzie Collins, who's hopefully our next Labour MP for Morecambe and Leinster.